Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Smile. Today's guest is Mark Purser. Mark has been studying the art and practice of yoga and meditation for over 20 years with experience in most of the major yoga traditions, including Ashtanga, Bikram, and Satyananda, as well as many years of practicing Taoist Qigong, Buddhist Vipassana, and Tantric meditation. Mark holds a 1,400-hour yogic studies diploma with the Academy of Yogic Science. Within his classes, Mark seeks to connect his students to the vast knowledge base of the yoga tradition in a meaningful and light-hearted way. Mark's classes embrace the flow from modern vinyasa-style practice with woven elements of yogic meditation practices, kundalini yoga, mantra, pranayama, and mindfulness. Mark is also the founder of the Yogic Meditation Institute, teaching courses in teacher training in Yoga Nidra and Yogic meditation philosophy and technique. Now, we share a mutual friend, the wonderful Danny Carr, who insisted that Mark should be a guest on the potty. So here we are. I'm so excited to dive into the conversation today. Mark, welcome to Behind the Smile. How are you?
Right now, I'm great. Yeah, it's really nice to be here, Ash. I'm stoked to be here. And I love how our mutual friend, Danny Carr, insisted in only the way she can. When she tells you to do something, you sort of have to listen.
You do. You just get into action. And I feel like because of that and how much she talks about you, I feel like I already know you. So I'm so excited just to dive into the meat and bones of this conversation today.
That's great. That's great. I actually just listened to the podcast that you did with her not so very long ago. And what a wonderful conversation that was.
Yeah,
there's a lot of wisdom there. Between you both, there's a lot of wisdom. I'm just really excited about this. You know, you and I have a mutual love, and Danny does too, this mutual love of sobriety, well-being, living life, and yoga, and what that looks like and how all those things weave together to make this wonderful life.
It's pretty special. I love finding people who have those similarities interwoven in their own lives. Like, it's really cool to meet sober people. It's really cool to meet yogis. And then when you meet people that have combined the two, which is actually not as uncommon as you would expect, I think it really blew my mind once I started down this path of recovery, just how many people do dive into these spiritual practices once they get sober. But we'll go into more of that in a moment. Hey, Mark, some super simple questions to kick things off for you. Tell me, where do you live? What does an average day look like? And what do you do for fun?
Ooh, okay. The first one's easy. I live in Byron Bay, and I've been around Byron Bay since the late 90s, like 1999. I think I moved to Byron Bay. Had the year 2000, dancing in the streets of Byron Bay. And I actually moved up here originally to study yoga. That's a bit of a story. But I've been around here for a really long period of time. I said 26, 27 years. I also have done stints of time elsewhere, lived in an ashram for a little while, have spent a lot of time in Indonesia, Bali over the last sort of 5 or so years. I mean, always I've been traveling in Indonesia, but for the last 5 or so years, more and more. And what an average day looks like. I don't do average days, Ash. That's the hard question. The first one's easy. Average day for me, like my dream day, is I do work a lot. So there's always some element of work. I do tend to work, I'm not going to say 7 days because I have a rule against that, but 6 days. And I've got one, hopefully, device-free day, certainly a computer-free day. But I do tend to, just check in on things on that day, whatever it is. And I like to do self-care every day, and that looks like a lot of different things. So there's always some form of meditation, something that's meditative. And this is a big part of what I really hoped that we could talk about today. We can go into it a bit further, but something that brings me closer to stillness. Let's just park it there. Something that's self-care related. I love to cook. That's a really big thing for me. I love to cook food. That's part of the self-care and self-nourishment, but it's also part of the fun. Lots of different things that I do, and it's fun. That's really important. And there's always some practice of connecting to people. So every day I love to be alone. I love my time alone, but I'm also really filled by meaningful catch-ups with people. And amazingly surrounded by a wonderful community. I've got a lot of great friends, a great family, which I nurture. And it's like a garden that you feed and nurture, and then it grows up around you and gives you support in the times when maybe you're a bit wobbly. And fun. This is an easy one because I'm really into fun. I love to have fun. Things that I do for fun, probably very different to things that maybe looked like fun 20 so years ago. But I surf a lot. I'm really active. For me, that's fun. It really is a sense of play in, and I do a lot of exercise, but I'm really into things that have a sense of play attached. Fun. I love to be in nature. Like, is it fun? Yeah, for me, it's fun being out there because I become lighter when I'm there. I think when I'm in those spaces, and so I think fun intrinsically has a sense of lightness to it. So we're not heavy with responsibilities, and I do have a lot of responsibilities. So anything that gets me away from that just momentarily, and being, I find in the forest, I just get bright. I'm happy. And where I live in Byron, there's a lot of amazing forests nearby. And the other thing I'm really into I've always liked music, and I used to work in the music industry, and I loved festivals, concerts, dance parties. I was a bit of a dance party dude for a while. But recently, I got right into salsa for a while. That was one of my journeys to getting sober. But then recently, in the last 7 months, I've got really into tango, into dancing tango. And
Really?
that's really fun. Yeah, and really addictive. I'm so into it.
Oh my goodness. And do you go to classes for that? Are you doing it at home? Like, how does one become
I'm doing
an expert
classes
in tango? Yeah, great.
Well, you become an expert in tango through many, many years of practice. It's really, really, really hard. Probably of all the partner dances, it's the hardest. And it's particularly harder for men, because I don't want to scare people off it, because the rewards are amazing. Because it is explained to me, like the price of entry is the highest of all of the partner dancers, but the experience is the best. It's I could just wax lyrical about tango for a long time. And because it's a part of my spiritual journey. It's a part of my sadhana. It's a part of my practice. So quite literally this morning, it's 9:45. I did a tango class at 8:00 this morning, which is sort of unusual.
Wow.
I don't usually do tango at 8:00 in the morning, but there's an amazing teacher here in Byron Bay and an amazing tango community. We've got a lot of Latinos living in the North Coast. You should have seen it when the football was on the other day. There's like blue and white and Spanish. Like the North Coast is just full of Latinos, and they call Byron Byron Eras or Byron Tina. There's particularly Argentinians. They just love it here. It's huge. Yeah. It's a new thing. Like 7 or 8 years ago, 10 years ago, the North Coast was white bread. I mean, there was always scatterings of different people, but the influx of Latinos is new. And because they all love lifestyle, like Latinos are really into lifestyle, and so they want to come to a place where lifestyle is important. And it's cool. They bring so much culture, including the dancing. But interestingly, my dance teacher is not Argentinian. She's Swiss, but she's amazing teacher, and just a really gifted. She was actually a school teacher, an amazing dancer, and has set up a dedicated tango studio in the heart of Byron Bay, which I feel really blessed. You know, when there's that classic old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. It was always on my roadmap. And I remember seeing, I don't know if you've ever seen the Al Pacino film, Scent of a Woman. Did you ever watch that film?
Never, no.
Oh, you must. It's a classic. And in that scene, Al Pacino in the movie, he's a US army colonel who's retired, and he's blind. He's had some accident, and he's very cynical, and he's very angry at the world, but he's also a man of much culture. And there's one classic scene where he dances tango, and it was one of the things that brought tango into the the modern time. And I mean, it's just such a wonderful dance. There's so much story, there's so much history, there's so much culture. And the dance itself is a moving meditation. It really is
Mm,
this really heartfelt meditation where you're actually dancing classical tango, Argentinian tango, is your heart to heart, cheek to
mm.
cheek. So
Oh,
if you
wow.
dance salsa or bachata or something, you're sort of more hip to hip. They're
Mm,
very, very flirty dances, whereas tango is just deep romance. You're actually, your hips aren't
mm.
connected so much, but you're actually literally connecting heart
Heart
to
to
heart.
heart. That is so
Mm,
beautiful. And I love what you said about it being a moving meditation. I very much feel like my asana practice is the same. It's just this way of being present without necessarily the stillness. And I think for somebody that can
mm,
often be a really great entry point into a mindfulness practice, right? Having a bit of
absolutely.
movement attached to it in one way or another. I also love how you saw that film and it was like the seed was planted and then it's years and years later that, as you said, the teacher
Mm,
appears. And I think that happens for so many of us along our spiritual journey. You know, I think
amazingly so.
I first, yoga came to me maybe, oh gosh, I want to say 15, 20 years ago, but I just wasn't ready for it at the time. You know, I was
Mm.
rocking up to classes drunk sometimes. Like I just so wasn't ready for it. Didn't really even understand there was a spiritual element to it. I was just trying to like, you know, get good glutes or something. I don't know. I was just totally not connected to the practice. And then, you know, when the time came and I was ready, it completely transformed my life. So
Mm,
thank you for sharing that, Mark. All right. Mark, you've brought in a photo today. I want to go there now. This is a
mm,
photo from a time in your life where you are hiding behind a smile. So you were presenting one version of yourself externally, but internally, a very different story. Could you please describe for our listeners the photo that I'm bringing up on the screen right now? What are we looking at here, and what was really going on for you at that time in your life?
Well, the reason I shared this photo, that photo was from 2009. So
Wow.
what are we at? 2009. That's 17 years ago. I was 17 years ago. I was 33 years old. So at that point in time, I had two young children. I was recently separated from their mother. So I was a single dad. And I was sort of gone from I had kids really young and I had no idea what I was doing. And I was at university and I'd been studying. I actually moved to Byron. So that photo is actually at the Buddha Bar in Byron Bay, which is quite a classic. You can see a photo of the Buddha, or say a picture of the Buddha there at the back of it, which is next to the Arts Factory backpackers, the famous backpackers, the back of Byron Bay. And so that, I mean, surrounded there by a couple of my best friends and a bunch of other. And you look at it, it's like, wow, what a bunch of good-looking, happy, smiling young people having a really good time. And in a sense, that was true. Like right in that moment, raising that beer, I thought everything was okay. And everything was okay. But the backstory, it was so interesting. And I've always looked back at that. So I remember one of my first sponsors in AA, he went through my Facebook and he said, oh, there's some interesting photos of you. Really sort of get a sense of you. Almost that. It's like I could see, he's a very perceptive guy. I could see almost that hiding behind the smile that you've been doing a lot of that. It's like, oh my God, you have no idea. There's been
Mm,
so much hiding behind the smile because that was for me, having that smiling, polished exterior was everything. It was the most important thing. And I figured if I had that and I could convince you that I was okay, I was okay. And so
yeah.
that particular day, funnily enough, spinning it back to tango, it was the first time I had ever been to a tango class. So there's a bit of a story. That day, that shot was probably about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay. I had at that period of time, I'd been dancing a lot of salsa. So I separated from my partner and immediately, like maybe 2 years before, and immediately I was like a dog off the leash. You know, I'd been a
Mm,
parent, I'd been really, and I was moved back into Byron Bay and I was like out every single night. And for the first time in my life, I thought that the reason I used to drink so much was because of my ex-partner. I thought she was just so annoying that was why I had to drink to help moderate that. And she used to say, why can't you just go to the pub and have a few beers and come home? I was like, oh, I know that you're going to be angry at me, so I just stay. And I honestly thought that she was the problem. And
mm,
it wasn't until we separated and all of a sudden I'm living on my own and I was out even longer. And I was out
mm.
more often. It's like, well, she's not there. I can't really fairly blame her anymore. I mean, I tried to, but then at a certain point, I would look at myself and go, maybe I'm part of the problem. There's something, and I became scared for the first time. I felt like I was in free fall, and like I've actually I really can't even pretend I've got any control. And I'd probably had been to an AA meeting at that stage. I'd sort of been introduced to AA over time. And I'd been doing a lot of yoga. And this is the other thing. I'd moved to Byron in 1999 to study yoga. So I'd had a lot of yoga in those years, late 90s, early 2000s. There's a few amazing yoga teachers here in Byron Bay, and I really threw myself into the middle of that. And then went to university, had kids, and then at that point, dad life, suburban life started to creep in, and I just wasn't equipped to deal with the pressure of that. I just didn't have any tools to deal with pressure, and all I had as far as my yoga practice went was an asana practice, and it was good. I was quite good at asana. I've done a lot of Ashtanga Vinyasa, a lot of Iyengar. I had some amazing teachers, done a lot of Bikram yoga, and physically I was really strong. And I thought that's a part of the puzzle, and it is a part of the puzzle. But as I'm sure you've figured out, it's not the only part of the puzzle. So that on its own, you can have the most amazing physique, but still be really messy inside. So on that particular day, I had it for the period of time before that, I had actually gotten right into dancing salsa. And I was dancing salsa in Byron. And I loved that because there was no alcohol. People wouldn't drink. It was active. It was social. I needed to socialize, but I needed to be able to socialize in ways that didn't involve alcohol because I knew I just couldn't drink. I knew I was scared of alcohol. And so I was always actively, the amount of effort I went to actively avoid alcohol was really, and the amount of stress that I went through was really interesting. And so there was a lot of fighting against it. But what would happen inevitably, because I really hadn't hit that point of deep surrender and acceptance that, I was alcoholic and it wasn't going to change. I thought I could just retrain myself to be able to drink successfully. And so I'd be right into salsa, but then I'd have a beer. And then for me, a beer would turn into however many beers. And I would just be going in one direction and then head off dramatically in an alternate direction. So, but on this particular day, I had a friend of mine who was right into Tango, and I'd always said, I really like Tango. I like the sound of it. I like the music. I want to try it out. And this friend of mine said, look, there's a Tango festival going on in Byron Bay and they have a beginner's class. Why don't you check out the beginner's class? So I had actually been to that beginner's class in the middle of the day, which was really weird because I was the only guy there. And this was I'm guessing that photo is probably October, November. It was the end of the football season. And the Tango class I'd been to, which was my first ever Tango class, the first and only Tango class that I went to, because I didn't go back to Tango for 15 years after that class, but I went to this Tango class and I was dancing with a guy. And there was because there was no other, I think there was a male and female, there was one other person in the class, and I spent half of the time dancing with the guy, which actually in tango is quite normal. If you go back into the history of tango, men used to train each other, used to practice with each other. So they would learn to dance. So when they actually started dancing with women, they were already good at it. But for me, I was at the Byron Bay Bowling Club. It was Saturday afternoon. It was the end of the football season, and the Byron Bay Rugby Club are there at the bar, and they're watching me dance tango with this other dude. And I'm like, this is the worst. And these guys are just getting smashed, and they're just watching me, and I'm just the most embarrassed I've ever been. This is the weirdest thing I've ever done. But I'm sort of fairly persistent. I put myself through. And then I remember I finished that class. It's about 2:00 in the afternoon. And I spoke to my friend. I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like, I was like, let's go get a coffee. And I'm like, because I really didn't want to drink this weekend. I'd done all these. I really didn't. I was scared of the weekends. That's kind of where I'd had whatever it was, a week off the booze, a couple of weeks off the booze. And I was scared of the weekend. I was scared of what would happen when I went out for that one beer. And so I'm said to my friend, let's go get a coffee. He's like, what are we going to get coffee for? It's 3:00 on a Saturday afternoon. Like, we're all going to the pub. Come to the pub with us. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I was all feeling anxious after that class. And I went to the pub, and that's me at the bar on that afternoon. And you can see there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of us. Is that? Yeah, 8 of us sitting there. And so we had a shout. And so we all drank 8 beers. And I remember 8 schooners they were. And 8 schooners is quite a lot of beer over that afternoon. And I remember getting really quickly, I probably hadn't eaten. So I got really quickly drunk. And I remember I had a slip. This is shortly probably after that. You can't see it, but if you had a photo of me in about 2 hours, I slipped in the bathroom. I cut my nose. And so I ended up, cut my eyebrow or something. And I ended up with blood, I'm bleeding, drunk. And then and that's just the beginning. then we've gone out. You know, that was just the warm up. Then we've gone out in Byron Bay, and I remember that night I got kicked out of basically because I had blood on me and I wasn't looking good, and I got kicked out of um, every single club or pub in Byron. My friends and I were just rowdy and running from one place to the next, and I had blood on me. It's never a good look when you're walking into an establishment.
No, not ideal.
And my friend there, the guy on the front left, is still one of my best friends. He used to call me Handbrake, and it was just like that was his nickname for me, because he said it was like he'd be always struggling to get me out because I was always resisting. Oh no, I don't want to go out because I was scared. And then he said the handbrake comes off, and then I'm just like a runaway train. I'm like, yeah, I mean, I still reflect on that. It was embarrassing, but it's like, it's true. You know, once the handbrake was off, you put some alcohol in the system. Like, you know, I don't have any, once that first drink's in the system, I don't know what's going on. You know, it's just and that is the reality that I had to accept. And so that night spilled on. I just remember the next day I was supposed to have my kids. And one thing I was always really passionate about was being a dad. I really wanted to be a good father. And I remember, and that night I ended up losing my car keys. I didn't lose them. In fact, I'd left them in my friend's car, but I'd had a little blackout and I'd forgotten. I didn't actually remember that until about 2 or 3 o'clock the next afternoon. I called my friend. He'd given us a lift from where we were there into town, and he hadn't been drinking, but just sort of dropped us there. And I said, I'm going to put my keys in your glove box for safekeeping, and because I'll lose them. And I woke up the next morning, had this massive night, woke up the next morning, I was like, where are my car keys? Shit, I don't know. I'm supposed to pick up the kids at 9 o'clock. Like, I had to call my ex and say, like, I'm so sorry, I don't know where my car. And she's just like, oh my God, you know, here we go again. You know, the poor, it was so embarrassing and humbling, and just that whole experience of like, it had that weekend had it all. And I remember it so clear. I remember the feelings. I remember the resistance of not wanting to drink. I remember the embarrassment of that tango class, which amazingly has come full circle just in the last 6 months. And, you know, it just, all of that, it was so, yeah, in that one photo, there I am smiling. It was just a moment in time, but there was so much going on in my life at that point. And it was that real pivotal point. I think I stopped drinking in 2009. I actually stopped drinking in 2011. That was my last drink happened in early 2011. So 2010, I actually ended up going and living in an ashram for 6 months.
Wow. Was that to like remove yourself? Were you like, I need to be away from alcohol? This is the way to do that?
Yeah. I should have been in rehab, but I decided to go into an ashram instead.
We try every other way first.
Oh, for sure. Like in those couple of years, I was going from like nights like what I've described to doing. I think I did like 3 or 4 Vipassana meditations. Like I was, you know, took this pendulum swing. I'd be like extremely into meditation, doing like, you know, a month of these intense sadhanas, whatever it was, and then I'd have a beer, and then I'd be like, all bets are off. And the next couple of months, I don't know what they looked like. But look, to be honest, towards the end, there was less and less of the meditation and just more and more of the drinking, to the point where it was just, I just had to, you know, and so the worse the drinking got, the more extreme my reactions needed to be, hence the 6 months in an ashram, which was amazing. And I learned a lot. And I think all of that actually got me to the point of acceptance a lot earlier. And I got this glimmer of hope through the meditation, through the yoga. And I was like, oh, there's something else that's available to me. If I stop drinking, there is community. And that was really, I can find a safe place. I can find a spiritual community. And because I was so sus on AA, I did anything but AA, like anything but that was kind of, I wanted a cool solution. I've always really wanted to be cool. And so I wanted something that was really cool. And it was sort of, you know, specifically designed for me. And, but at the end of it, you know, I tried, because after I did the big stint in the ashram, and then I left and I drank again, and I ended up in a pretty bad spot. And quickly, you know, it was like the next day I started drinking again. Within a month, I'm looking at because I used to get very depressed as well. It wasn't just alcohol. There was a acute depression, a sadness. I used to talk about this great sadness. I just felt like my life was just disappearing, and all my plans were just, nothing was happening, and it was just getting worse and worse. And I had that, you know, slow acceptance of like, I'm failing at this. Life is I was always really positive about my life. I always thought life is going to be this amazing adventure, and it was just rapidly going in the other direction.
Mm.
So that photo says a lot, that was a real pivotal moment. But yeah, I think about 18 months. I mean, I've been in and out of AA a few times, and probably it was January too. So that's 2009. I can't remember. I'm guessing it's sort of September, October. I had my last drink on the 16th of January, 2011. So that was, let's say, 14 months after that.
Wow. So tell me what made that last drink? What was different about that experience? Was there a rock bottom moment? You mentioned the word surrender, which I think is a really beautiful way to describe, like, until we're willing to fully surrender, like, sobriety is a really difficult road. But that minute that you go, okay, now I've truly had enough now, and you become willing to do whatever it takes. I think that was my experience. What was different about that last drink?
Okay. Well, it was very lonely. My last drink, literally, I was January 2011. And we'd sort of had Christmas. My last few months, I'd left the ashram. I'd ended up going and working in the Hunter Valley. My sister sort of lives there, and she'd got me a job. I'd been working in film and television, and I had a degree in digital media. I'd had a career. I thought I was going to be some ginormous success. And I ended up driving tractors in the Hunter Valley, working in vineyards, doing sort of rural agricultural maintenance, which for me, I was telling myself I was having a rural renaissance. That was what but really I was hiding. I couldn't do the other work. And there was a lot of it. I mean, I was working in the Hunter Valley. It's the wine region. And we had Christmas time. And I was working for this contractor who was actually working across a lot of different vineyards. And we were just being given bottles of wine by all of our clients. And I just ended up with all this wine. And what happens when you give me a box of wine, or multiple boxes of wine, is that I drink it. And that I started drinking at Christmas time, and I didn't really stop. And so I went away we went down to Jindabyne, and I had some time with my kids, and I came back to the Hunter, and I was just so broken by that point. And I ended up thinking, I'm going to go camping. And it was like, I was supposed to be working. I'm like, you know what? I couldn't be bothered working. I just drove up into the Wallamai National Park, which is an amazing national park. And they had a map, and the map just had this one spot that said Aboriginal place. I thought, I'm just going to drive there. And the Wallamai is wild. It's and I had a four-wheel drive, and I've driven in there half cut. And then I ended up camping there for a couple of days, and I had, drinking wine and beer, whatever it was. And, I mean, I'm telling myself I'm having a camping trip. This is my holiday. But really, I mean, I was basically just a vagrant out in the hills. And I ended up running out of alcohol. And I woke up on this morning, and I was in the most beautiful place. And it wasn't this amazing little valley and this beautiful little river that ran through it. There was nobody there. And so I'd had my drink the day before, because I've been drinking pretty much nonstop for a couple of days. And then I woke up that morning, and there was actually, at that place, there was a little walk you could do to this. And I hadn't even got there yet. Like, I'd basically gotten there 2 days before and just started drinking. So sitting in the creek and just smoking cigarettes, reading a book, whatever I was doing, and just, playing music and thinking I was having a good time. But, I was in a pretty bad way. And then that morning, I didn't have any alcohol. I'm going to drive to the nearest town, which was probably going to be a few hours because I was deep in the national park. I'm going to get more alcohol. I'm having a great time here. I'll get more alcohol, buy some more cigarettes and food, and then I'll come back. Notice I had said alcohol, cigarettes, and food in that order, because food would have been the last thing on the menu. But, I knew that I needed to eat to stay alive. And so, but that morning I thought, I'm just going to walk to this Aboriginal place. And it was this amazing cave. Maybe it was 200 meters from the little campsite. And I sat there for a little while and had all these beautiful handprints. You could just feel the magic in the place. I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then I started to drive from where I was at this campsite, which is basically up this crazy four-wheel drive track. And had been off grid for a few days, so no phone reception. And then I got to a sort of a high point, and my phone started pinging with all these messages. And I started getting all these messages saying, oh, happy birthday, Mark. I'm like, oh, fuck, it's my birthday. I had completely forgotten it was my birthday. There's no self-love there. There was no, hey, you know, my birthday is something I should be celebrating with friends or family. So selfish as well. It's like, hey, Mark, there's probably people who want to see you and are actually worried about where you are. You have children, you have a family. You know, there was just me on my own, just so retracted from the world. And at that point in time, I had a little moment of like, I just remember there was a lady I used to work with and say, hey, Mark, I haven't seen you, because I'd been working like in Byron. I left Byron about sort of 5 or 6 months before, gone to the ashram, ended up working, driving the tractors. And this really lovely lady was just checking in on you. Just, you know, I know things have been a bit difficult for you. And, you know, people, they know something's not quite right, but they're just being very supportive and non-judgmental. And I just had that message of like, I'm loved. I remember that message, and a few other ones got through to me. And I thought, you know what? I've got a choice here. I could turn my car that way and I could go to that town and go to that pub and buy what I wanted to buy. Or I could actually go there because I haven't had a drink yet today and it's my birthday and I've got a choice here. I could turn my car that way and I could actually go to Sydney, because I could go back to Sydney. I could ask for help. And I had met a guy 12 months before who'd agreed to be my sponsor. I'd put a toe in the water. You know, they talk about half measures availed as nothing. Well, you know, I was like a 10th measure. Like, I'll just come to a meeting every now and then when it suits me. Kind of that was my commitment to recovery, because I wasn't, in my opinion, a really bad alcoholic. I was just, you know, I had my other solution. I was going to spiritualize my way through it. And at that point in time, I was kind of desperate enough and humbled enough to go, oh, maybe I do need some help here, you know, and scared. You know, I often talk about, when I talk about recovery, the things that got me sober, there's this balance between horror and hope. So it's the horror that, you know, enough horror. I was going, oh, that was pretty bad. That's pretty scary. I'm fairly out of control here. And then there's enough hope that hopefully comes in fairly quickly of like, there's something better beyond this. And the more you do of it, the better that better thing is going to be, that experience. And so there had been glimmers of hope that had been dropped in, particularly through the yoga practice. And I had the year before, I'd been sober for at least 6 months of it and had some beautiful experiences. But I wanted more of that. I wanted to go back to that ashram. They actually had a teacher training course, which was a 2-year teacher training course that I really wanted to do. And there was magic. So there was magic happening there as well. But at that point in time, I just knew that alone wasn't going to be enough. And so I made a decision that day that I called this guy and said, look, I'm coming back to Sydney. And I have a cousin who's 35 years sober now. She's just always been amazing support for me, and a really really inspirational person who'd introduced me to meditation. It had just introduced, and not by telling me about stuff, but by actually demonstrating through her own life of like, wow, recovery can look really good. Like, I didn't know. I mean, I didn't even know she was sober most of the time. She's about 15 years older than me. And I just remember being a teenager and looking at her and going, wow, she's having a good time. Like, she's different to the other adults. There's something different there. She looks happy, and she's not. I knew she didn't drink. Was kind of irrelevant. It was just, I just thought, wow, she's having a good time. Like, wow, she's, doing this and doing that. She's always really into trekking and exploring the world. She's always been, studying. She's done like 3 master's degrees and a PhD. I was like, this is a human being who's out there doing life. And later on, I found out her journey with sobriety and AA and recovery and meditation and, all the things that she was doing to get her to the point where she could experience that life. So there were people there, and she'd actually introduced me to this initial sponsor, and I'd called him, I called her, and I said, look, I really want to come back to Sydney. I'm going to go to rehab, and I really want to jump back into things. And I meant to say to this sponsor, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. Just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And he said, okay, rehab's a great choice. I want you to go to a meeting. It was pretty simple. Go to a meeting every day for the next 90 days. I want you to call me every day for the next 90 days. Get into that rehab. I'll show you, call these people and, start coming to a meeting. When can you go to a meeting? I said, I can drive back from Sydney today and I can go to a meeting tomorrow. Great. What meeting are you going to go to? Have a look at the website, choose a meeting. Okay, cool. I'll see you there. And I did. And I just, and for the next little while, a couple of years, I kind of did everything which is the first time in my adult life, I did everything I was told to do. So this guy gave me a whole lot of instructions, and I went to rehab and they gave me a whole lot of instructions, and I was sufficiently defeated that I was able to keep my ego back for a little while and I'm just going to do what I'm told. And what a miraculous journey that has been. That's nearly 16 years now.
That's incredible, Mark. I can't believe listening to your story, I just relate to so much of it. Now, that doesn't surprise me because we're both in 12-step fellowship. And, I think that there's this common through line with us alcoholics where even though our stories might sound different, a lot of it's all the same. And that idea of trying to find other solutions to do anything other than AA, I remember feeling exactly the same. I resisted AA for so long, for so many years. I wasn't interested. I didn't want to be an alcoholic. I was terrified of what my life would look like in sobriety because my entire identity was wrapped up in being this party girl and, having a big social life and all the friends I thought I had. And once I got into the rooms, the thing that I think has been different for me and part of the reason why relapse isn't part of my story is that I did exactly what you did. I sat down, I closed my mouth, I opened my ears, and I took direction. And pretty much if my sponsor said jump, my response was how high. Every single time, taking that direction, getting to meetings. And I must admit, when I meet somebody now who's early on in their recovery and they're full of the excuses. Oh, I can't get to that meeting. I can't do that work. I can't do this. I can't do that. I feel sad because I'm like, they say it works if you work it, and it's so simple, but it's true, right? If you just do everything. And I think, that like you said, a year to 2 years of just really making this your number one priority, then your life just seems to rebuild itself around you without you having to direct your effort into those other parts of your life. It will just happen as long as you make recovery the number one focus.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like you, I've seen people do it in so many different ways. They talk about the gift of desperation. I'm so grateful that I was desperate enough. I remember being told before I got sober, when I first sort of came into AA, I was living in Byron. I had a few friends who'd gone through the Butterss, which is quite a well-known rehab up here, but that was a big 3 or 6 month program, and they were often pretty broken. A lot of those people, hardcore addicts, and I just didn't see myself in that category. I really didn't. And I remember, but there was people I'd met, and they were sober, and they'd done that program, and they had a lot of insight. But for them, they'd come out of a long-term rehab and it's all they were doing were meetings. I was like, I just don't want my life to look like that. I want my life to have more in it. And, sure enough, it does, now it does. But I remember being told for the first time, you should try doing 90 meetings in 90 days. And I was like, I'm a single parent. I work, a full-time job. Like, I don't have time for that. And I remember this friend of mine was just like, yeah, at a certain point you will, and the tragedy of that is that it was true. And it just it had to get as bad as it had to get to. Like if I look back now, I was like, there was no way I was going to do 90 meetings. I had salsa classes to go to. I had surfing to do. I had, I had fun to be had, and I had kids to look after. I had a job to do. But sure enough, 2 years later, all of that had been taken away. And it was, that's as bad as it. And I can't tell other people how to do it in the sense I could recommend 90 meetings in 90 days is what changed it for me. I truly pray that people don't have to get as bad as they have to get to, they don't have to get as bad as I got, because I was way too close to the edge. I remember having these visions of just being on the edge of a precipice, and of like, if I go much further, I'm disappearing into some sort of abyss. Like, at that point, anything can happen, accidents. So I was spending a lot of time ruminating about ending it all. There was just this deep sadness that I wasn't waking up from. It wasn't just a bad day. It was a really long period of just deep depression and sadness and that loss of hope. And the great news was, though, as soon as I got sober, even that first couple of days, hope came back like that. Like, I was hopeful about the next meet. What happens when I go back to Sydney? What happens when I go to rehab? This is new. And sure enough, a week sober, 2 weeks sober, 1 month sober, of like, wow, okay, things are rapidly, they're rapidly different in the sense that, hey, I'm not drunk anymore. That's a big one. And I'm not in control of my own life. I don't have to be in control of my own life anymore. That feeling, it's just so deeply relaxing to actually hand over to somebody else. Okay, just for the next little while, just for today, you just show me what to do. and becoming open and becoming teachable. And then this process, which is a slow awakening, I think, certainly was for me, of just handing over power and connecting to the divine and realizing that, you know, in the darkest days, there is always hope and there is always light. And if we can seek it and become open and listen for it, there is a teacher out there. There is a guide, you know, there is a divine presence, call it what you want. And that that never gets boring, and that only gets better. And if you work it, it just becomes more present, and we learn to trust more. And it's this, I say it's an invisible force, but it's truly, if you look at, I look at my life, it's truly visible in the way that I've been shown, you know, what is the next right thing to do? What's the next action? What do I do next?
So, Mark, I'm so curious to know, we were sort of chatting about this offline a few weeks ago. One thing that I remember being taught early on in my recovery was you have to put AA above everything else, or your recovery above everything else, otherwise you lose everything else. And then I was also told you're going to get your life back. And then once your life gets really big, you're going to not have time for AA. And then I've also seen people move down the path of their recovery and they have treated their alcoholism. They're not at risk of picking up a drink and they're starting to enhance their spiritual life in other areas. So my question is, how has your relationship with AA evolved over time and what does it look like now?
Okay. Well, I had an interesting perspective coming into it, and that I had, as I've told you, you know, a lot of exposure to yoga, a deep love of yoga, a wanting to go deeper there, but also knowing that wasn't going to work until I got sober. So that was a part of my realize I can't, and yoga alone and the yoga community wasn't getting me. So I'd given it a really good go. You know, I'd gone and, unless I went and lived in the ashram permanently, but I didn't want to do that. I wanted to be in the world. And I look at part of me and said, maybe that's just, I just can't be in the world. I just have to live an ashram life and that's it. So, but I knew I wanted to be in the world. I always had this sense of destiny of like, okay, I need to, when I calm myself and when I quiet my mind, my heart knows where it wants to go. I just need to get my anxiety out of the way. And that's where the practice is really helpful. And so there was certainly a period of time in my recovery, my actual recovery, like the time when I actually got sober. And the first few months, I was just 100% AA. And I started doing some stretching again, you know, like, and some yoga again, and probably little bits of yoga. And then I started going back to yoga classes. And then I started going back to, probably 6 months sober, started going back to the ashram. And I think I was 2 years sober when I really took on, they had this teacher training program that I said I really wanted to do. I said, I'm going to wait till I'm 2 years sober and then I'm going to start doing that teacher training program. And at that point in time, there was a lot of contemplation. I was, you know, still 100%. I'm still 100% committed to 12-step recovery. But what I realized over time, and I work with a process in yoga. I sort of connected to this Satchitananda yoga tradition, which is very much deeply based in meditation, philosophy, bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion, karma yoga. So it's a holistic integral yoga system. So it's much more than just asana. Asana is a part of it, but at the heart of it is, in fact, they talk about bhakti, the yoga of devotion, which in fact is at the heart of 12-step recovery and is at the fact of any worthwhile spiritual tradition. Bhakti is devotion. Bhakti is giving. And all of the 12 steps are basically designed to get you to the 12th step, which the 12th step is just about service. It's about being useful. It's about coming into the world and showing up and giving back. That is the divine purpose of the human. And that is when we are at our best. So anything that we do to support that is good. And if you're alcoholic or addict, whatever it is, most people are addicted to something. I've heard, we talk about vritti in yoga, this modifications of the mind. Everybody have vrittis. Maybe you're a chronic alcoholic. Maybe you're addicted to your phone or whatever it is. Anything that's getting in between you and showing up in the world and doing your absolute best and giving your absolute best is something that needs to be looked at. And obviously in chronic addiction, it's massive. You just can't get past it. Like nothing else is going to happen until I get alcohol out of the way or the drug out of the way or whatever it is. That particular behavior needs to be dealt with as priority number one. But once that's gone, there's going to be a whole lot of other stuff, inevitably. So we need to look at the other stuff. And it's an ongoing process. For me, alcohol's not, it's something I'm aware of. I very rarely think about it. I used to think about alcohol a lot more when I was drinking. Now it's just like, it's just not there. It's just not part of my, I identify as an alcoholic, but the irony is that I haven't drunk for so long. When I was drinking every day or regularly, I didn't identify as an alcoholic. I was just, I used to think that I couldn't come into AA because people would think I'm an alcoholic, but anyone who'd see me drink would go, oh, that guy's an alcoholic, or he's got a terrible problem with alcohol, whatever that looks like. So this intersection between yoga and 12-step recovery, really, there are fundamentals that are true for all spiritual tradition. And I'm going to call service being at the core of that, the core truth. And karma yoga is basically how I show up in the world. What do my behaviors look like? What am I doing? My speech, my actions. And we take a really good look at that in 12-step recovery. Yoga is a practice of devotion. It's a practice of cultivating ourselves to be the best version of who we can be. 12-step recovery is exactly the same. And I'm a bit of a history buff, and I sort of dove into the history of AA and 12-step recovery and learned very quickly that it's come from the same lineage. So if you look at where AA came from, it sort of stemmed out of the Oxford group, which was a spiritualist path that sort of evolved in UK and the United States in the 1800s. That had stemmed out of the Theosophy Society, the Theosophists, which was started by a lady by the name of Madame Blavatsky. And it's the same stem, anthroposophy. So I actually had a stint where I was working in a Steiner education. And anthroposophy is a breakaway from Theosophy. And Theosophy was developed basically from Vedantin and Tantric teaching. So Madame Blavatsky, who was a German, Austrian, I think, European, she traveled to India, spent a lot of time studying with sadhus, studying with Indian yoga teachers, and then came back to Europe and created this system of Theosophy, which had a lot of kind of cool stuff. There's seances and there's all sorts of, a little bit of spiritual wackery in there, but a lot of truth, a lot of goodness, and a lot of the stuff that we learn through 12-step recovery about who am I? How am I showing up in the world? How am I behaving? And what are my modifications? It's the stuff of the Yoga Sutras, right? Understanding yama and niyama, and beginning to examine ourselves, examine our behavior outside in the world, examine our patterns of thinking and our actions. So this is all just fundamental spiritual truth. So Theosophy basically gave birth to the Oxford group, which just it codified, it created a system through which we can explore this. And what 12-step recovery did was just give that a very specific focus. Okay, we're taking yoga philosophy, essentially, we're taking yoga philosophy and we're going to put it into a package that makes sense for people who are addicted to alcohol. That's it. And then, and Narcotics Anonymous did the same thing. So it works really well, but it actually works so much better when we spin it and make it specifically for people who are addicted to narcotics and people who are addicted to gambling. When I was in rehab, I went to a couple of, I've never really had a problem with gambling, but I went to a couple of Gamblers Anonymous meetings, and it was amazing to hear the conversations that people were having, because it was exactly the same stuff. But they were just using gambling as the thing that got them out of the way. And it can be the same with sex. It can be the same with, it's all the big ones: food, sex, buying things is distraction, distraction, distraction.
And it's that identification that you get, I think, that creates the potency of the solution in these 12-step fellowships. It's like, I see my story in someone else, because before I step into this environment, I feel so desperately alone. Like you described it so well, Mark, that deep depression, that isolation, feeling like you are terminally unique and that you need, therefore, a unique solution. But the reality is what you're going through is just the same as everybody else who's suffering from this same illness or this same disease, and we share a common solution. So because I didn't identify with the label alcoholic, I was like, I have a great job, I have a husband, I have a home, that's not me. And then being in those rooms, sitting on a chair in a meeting in Curl and seeing women who had corporate jobs, who had all the things I had, sharing the way they drank. And I was like, oh my goodness, that's me. That's when I became willing to hear the solution and actually give it a proper go. Because I was like, well, if it can work for them, maybe it can work for me too.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
And that identification is everything, having that community, having that connection. I don't have to have the answers. It's funny, I used to go to those meetings in Coco. That was actually where I got sober. So I moved from Byron back to Sydney. I went to rehab in Sydney, and I was originally from the Northern Beaches. And so I moved back to the Northern Beaches and started going to meetings there. For my first 5 years, I actually left Byron, and my first 5 years of recovery were in the Northern Beaches. I was either studying yoga in ashram, which was just outside of Sydney, or working and being a part of my family, which was in the Northern Beaches. That was quite new as well, being a part of the family again. But that feeling of connection, that Gabor Mate has a fantastic saying, which I heard in a meeting, is the opposite of addiction is connection. Us as addicts is what's me on my own trying to figure out all my own problems. I had this idea that I would get sober. I'm going to carry this one for a long time. I would say I wanted to have a year off drinking so I could just get all my shit together. I figured by the end of that year, I'd make so much money, all my financial problems would go, and then I'd just be able to return back. And so I'd quietly just disappear off, fix all my problems, and then I'd be able to re-enter society. And it just wasn't true. I just didn't have the capacity. I still don't have the capacity to fix all my own problems. I just don't. I need help, Ash. I need help. And we all do. We all do. I think we all do. I mean, maybe some people don't. I know that I do. And that's so comforting. I've had, in the last month or so, I've had a few things happen that have been really stressful. And it's interesting to observe. I observe myself, how I behave when I'm under stress. And my default, thankfully, these days is to reach out. I pick up the phone and I reach out to friends, to members of AA, to people in my community. Danny Carr, who you mentioned, has just been such a good friend to me for a long time, but recently, just one of those people you can call. And I'm so lucky to have people like that in my phone that I can call and that I can actually reach out to and just say, hey, I've got some stuff going on. Can you listen?
Yeah.
And then be there for them. Because it goes both ways, right?
Of course.
It goes both ways. We've got to be able to show up for other people. And that's a really fundamental part of it, being able to listen and being able to give. But it's this giving and receiving, which is the nature of the universe. This is the stuff where I've loved going into yoga and exploring tantra. And at the moment I'm exploring Tango, which is this expression of this energy system of giving and receiving and learning from a man, learning how to lead and take authority, but also how to listen in a way that there's so many different ways that you can explore. And at the moment, like, Tango is a big part of my yoga practice. I look at it as a part of my meditation practice. I still do the other things, but it's a new frontier where I can explore these philosophical truths.
Beautiful. And something you mentioned right at the beginning of the conversation, Mark, was your stillness practice and how that's evolved and changed. Tell me more about that. Why is it so important to you? What does it look like?
Okay, so stillness is really fundamental. Again, pointing back to yoga philosophy, which just has this amazing way of exploring and explaining the universe. So we've got this play between Shiva and Shakti, or Purusha and Prakriti. So we're talking about stillness as Shiva. There's two different names: Shiva, which is the deity, and Purusha, which is the philosophical concept. It basically means the same thing. It's pure consciousness. It's stillness. And then we have Shakti, which is energy, movement, action, doing things. So this play that is going on between us, between stillness and movement. So what we tend to have in the West, certainly, it's a lot of movement, a lot of action. And a lot of us come to the understanding that success comes from more movement. The more you do, the more successful you are. Unfortunately, that is not true, because what happens when you have a lot of movement without Shiva, without the consciousness, without awareness of movement, then you just create, it's just chaos, right? So too much Shakti, too much action without the Shiva, it's chaos. There's no direction to it. So you can do a lot, and I'm sure we've all been here and we've seen people who are doing this, is just doing a lot, but actually nothing good is happening. You know, it could be the opposite, or just a whole lot of words, a whole lot of actions, but not a lot of stuff. So the stillness practice is fundamental, doing less, winding it back. And so the yoga practices that have been, any sort of yoga practice that brings you back to stillness. And one of the things that I observed early on in my 12-step journey, I was interested in success. I wanted to do well. I saw that there was some people who were doing really well. And by doing really well, they looked happy. They had interesting lives. They were doing things in their life. And I was like, what? And then some people who may have been sober for a long time was like, oh, I don't really envy your life. I can still see the chaos. The thing that differentiated, I'd interview them. I'd go seek them out. And what are you doing? And one thing I noticed that all of those people who were successful had in common is that they all had a practice that brought them back to stillness. Meditation, some form of meditation generally. It could be yoga, it could be Buddhism. There's some form of intentional active meditation that they were practicing. And so that resonated to me. And when I say to people the things I would recommend that everybody does in life, I don't say everyone should do yoga. Okay. I would say, but have something that brings you back to stillness and something that has a bit of structure around it. I think that's important too. So for me, what it's looked like, I've done a lot of meditation, a lot of yoga, a lot of pranayama, really, really into breathwork, Kriya yoga. I've sort of covered the whole curriculum of yoga, really from full-on hardcore Ashtanga Vinyasa, exploring all the amazing varieties of asana to the pranayama. The Satchitananda Yoga has a really comprehensive system of pranayama and Kriya yoga. I've done a lot of Kriyas. Amazing stuff. I recommend it all. It's been such a wonderful journey. The thing that sort of sticks to me, and when I think about stillness, I think about Yoga Nidra. It's the practice that came in thankfully really early on in the piece for me, and it's just stuck. And it takes me back to quiet better than anything else. And like I'm talking about just not soft, just complete silence. There's a word they talk about as turiya, which is the silent place, the timeless place. It's a place beyond time, even, where you can completely disconnect from the mind and come into this really deep rested mind state, which is quite magical because it just gives you a moment of respite away from your active mind. So for people who don't know Yoga Nidra, I mean, it's done from a lying down position. So I loved that. It was very restful. It's called yogic sleep. A lot of the time people do fall asleep, but if you can learn to stay awake during Yoga Nidra, the opportunity there to completely rebuild your nervous system, completely reformat your mind and rest your body. It's quite magical. And look, if I had to pick a singular thing, I often say if I had to hand back all my toys, all my yoga tools, and I only got to keep one, it would probably be Yoga Nidra.
Wow. That's a powerful statement, and I completely understand why.
It's a big one. I know. Yeah. I don't want to hand them all back. I don't feel like I should have to.
It's all right.
No, I can keep them. I've earned them.
Thankfully, we get to hold on to them.
Yeah,
totally.
I've earned them. But they're, then that's the great thing about it is once you've done the practice and you understand the practice, it's yours. I don't have to pay anyone for it. I've taught hundreds, thousands of people now, many thousands of people really. And, they're tools that they were gifted to me. I mean, I might have paid to do courses and whatnot, but for the most part, yoga teachers aren't, they're not charging a lot for what they give. But once I've got them, they're mine. I become the custodian. And so I can pay it forward, pass it on to other people, but just most importantly, I've got it there for myself when I need it.
So beautiful. I feel like that segues so perfectly into the final question that I have for you today, Mark, and that is, What are your 3 non-negotiables that allow you to live your life today happy, authentic, and free?
Oh, I love this question, Ash. I love this question. Well, look, I just answered the first one, and that's having something every day. So I made a sankalpa. A sankalpa is a tool that you use in Yoga Nidra. It's a resolve, and it becomes the central part of your practice. And in fact, it becomes this, for me, it became the central part of my whole life. And this is this thread between 12-step fellowship, yoga, spiritual well-being. And for me, my first sankalpa was first comes sadhana. And what I mean by sadhana is a spiritual practice. Anything that brings us back closer to silence, anything that brings us back closer to God. So that could have been my meetings. It could have been my service. It could have been my yoga practice. It can be my tango class. It can be something. It could be doing some reading. But that is the most important thing in my life. Number one is that I have something every day that brings me closer to the divine. Usually a combination of things, not just one, but a minimum of one. Even though I'm super busy, I'm doing one thing every day. It may be a moment of prayer. Just one thing. You actually shared something on your Instagram the other day, and I screenshot it. I don't have it with me, but you had a list of things that you'd done in the previous week, of all the things that you'd done. There was an AA meeting. There was however many yoga classes, however many things that you'd done. It was great. And I actually screenshot it. I've got it on my phone. But I was like, that's because that's what my week looks like. If I look at over a course of a week, there's a whole bunch of different things that I do, but they've all got the same intent. And the intent is that they're sadhana. The intent is that they bring me closer to God. So that's number one, something that brings me closer to the divine. First comes the sadhana. Number two is that I have some fun. I didn't get sober to just be getting sober. I got sober because I wanted to have a good life. I want my life to be expansive. I want my life to have joy. So I do really make an effort to have fun. And that often looks like exercise. So I'm sort of saying, sadhana can look like exercise. So there's a physical element to it as well. And having a sense of purpose. So that can be work. It can be my role as a parent, as a sponsor, as a teacher, as somebody who just shows up, but having a sense of purpose and responsibility where I'm bringing it back into the world. I've been really fortunate. I've been well loved. I've been so supported through so many different avenues, through 12-step recovery, through the yoga tradition, through my family, through so many amazing friends that I have. And now my responsibility is to show up and to give something back. So a little bit of that every day is really important too.
So, so beautiful. Oh, Mark, I'm just so grateful that we've had this conversation today, for you to be here and to share what I feel is like just a drop in the ocean of your inner wisdom. I definitely need to invite you back. There's so much more that I want to talk about, which we'll hopefully have time to do further down the track. But I just wanted to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being here today. I have no doubt my audience is going to want to know more about you, what offers you have coming up, where they can find you. Would you be able to share a little bit for us?
Yeah, sure. Look, to be honest, at the moment, I'm not teaching a lot. So I'm only running, for the last few years, I've just been teaching back-to-back teacher trainings and courses, retreats, etc. I just ran a retreat in Bali with Danny, which was amazing. I'm only scheduling one course this year, which will be amazing. In November, we have a course called Kundalini Tantra, which is being held in Rockland, the Rockland Yoga Ashram at Daylesford, Victoria, which will be really incredible. It's the first time I've taught there, which is a bit of a coming home for me because it is such an under yoga ashram. And it's a very special course. It's sort of bringing yoga tantra together in a really meaningful, purposeful way. So exploring Kriya Yoga, exploring Tantric Hatha Yoga. It's a great course. It's actually being presented as a teacher training. So it's great for yoga teachers if they want to learn more about tantric tools, kriyas, advanced pranayam, we do a lot of mantra. So I'm actually teaching that one with a guy, Shivam Rath, who's an amazing musician. And we actually ran the course last year in Bali, and I think half of the people who are doing that course have already signed up to do it again. So that sort of says
that
something.
Says a lot.
Yeah, it's nearly full, that one. And then I'm going to be at the Woodford Folk Festival. I'm teaching yoga at the Woodford Folk Festival, which will be amazing. I did that last year, which is probably Australia's biggest folk festival in Woodford in Queensland. And then early next year, I'm going to be running. I've got a meditation and meditation, yoga nidra, and breathwork teacher training that I run, which is an amazing 3-month course. And I'll be running that early next year. If you're interested in doing that, I can put you on a waiting list. It's a big one for me to run. So I'm just giving myself a little bit of a break from teaching that this year. And then I'll be running more and more retreat. Next year will be a bit more active in 2027, I'll be running a number of retreats and stuff. Danny and I just did this Beautiful Life retreat in Bali, and we are going to be doing that again in Australia next year, but we haven't quite set the date yet.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure everyone will be keeping an eye out for more information. I'll link everything in the episode show notes as well. We say here on Behind the Smile that when we recover loudly, no one needs suffer in silence. So Mark, thank you so much for being here today. I'm super grateful.
Oh, my absolute pleasure, Ash. What a wonderful conversation. Just lights us up. It's great. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.